guys, my name is James and I work with a charity called UCCF, which helps students explore the Christian faith. Thanks so much for tuning into this video as part of Clifton CU's series of events called Redefine. Today I'm going to be talking about our identity and self-worth. I hope to help us to think about the importance of identity, where we can find it, and maybe even to redefine what our identity is. We're going to look at how both the Christian and secular worldview try to address this question, and why I believe that the better story is that God made us all diverse and individual and gave us an ultimate and eternal worth and identity which cannot change. Now, this may sound too good to be true, but can I encourage you to join with me as we investigate it? Because if it is true, then I believe it is life-changing. So, to begin, I heard a story a while ago about a cancelled flight. And as you can imagine, when this happens, there was uproar and everyone was clamouring at the check-in desk, wanting to be booked onto the next flight. And one customer just charged through the crowd, went straight up to the desk and slapped his ticket down and said, "I have to be on the next flight." Now, maybe as you can imagine, if you've served customers before, you have to be polite and you have to be nice to the customer and say, I'll serve you after this customer that's just gone. But in reply, this customer was quite brash, quite rude, and said to her, "Do you know who I am?" Well, now in reply to this, I wouldn't do what this woman did here if you want to keep your job. But she turned on the tannoy and said, Can someone come and help at gate 2 because someone's here who doesn't know who he is. Now, as you can imagine, that left the man feeling quite embarrassed and probably the check-in clerk being in trouble. But I also heard another story about the time the Queen Mother was visiting a retirement home and was chatting with another lady who obviously didn't quite know that she was chatting to the Queen Mother. And she was chatting to her and she said, do you realise who I am? You know, this was the Queen Mother. Everyone knew who she was. To which in reply that the older lady just smiled and said, "Oh dear, you must have forgotten who you are. Go and ask that nurse over there. She knows all of our names." Now you may wonder where I'm going with those stories. Well, unlike in those stories, we may not expect everyone to know who we are, but we all have this want to be known for people to see our value. I spent a lot of my life before university living in New Zealand, and I think one of the most British things I found when starting university was the politeness, the classic British politeness. And one specific scenario I witnessed quite a few too many times is this, and I wonder if you can relate to it. I'd be walking along with a friend, maybe going to a lecture, and then they'd see someone and it would seem like they recognise each other and they'd have a conversation and catch up for 15 minutes or so. I'd just be standing there awkwardly. And then we'd move on and we'd walk on and I'd say to them, "Who was that person? How do you know them?" And they'd say, "I can't remember." They've literally just had a conversation with someone for 15 minutes and can't remember who they are. British politeness dictates that you can't make the situation awkward by asking, so you just have to persevere in awkwardness. We may joke about the absurd politeness of that kind of scenario, but I think it also comes from a root of the fact we understand how much being known and remembered gives us value and worth. So I wonder, where do you find your value? You may not have thought about that kind of question before. I don't know what the last year has looked like for you and how it might have affected your view of yourself. If you're a second or third year, then I'd imagine you're really missing some of the great things of student life, whether having university sports, pig night out ocean, or in-person society events. Well, if you're a first year, you maybe applied for university with the high expectations of making lifelong friends and trying out loads of new societies and having the time of your life. but now you can't even meet everyone on your floor or block. Societies are doing everything online, and you're questioning whether you even want to continue at university. I just want to say in response to that I really empathise with you. I know a lot of how you feel. I graduated last year, and coronavirus meant I missed out on sports finals, graduation, and saying proper goodbyes. This last year has been hard. I wonder how it's left you feeling. How has it affected your view of yourself, your self-worth? Dr. Joe Rubino, in his book on self-esteem, reported that 85% of the world's population are affected by low self-esteem. Close to home, a 2017 study by Dove found that 61% of girls in the UK have low self-esteem. And furthermore, a government poll in 2019 found that 57% of 18 to 24-year-olds admit to having felt anxious because of their body image and how it meant people perceived and valued them. And we might also expect these stats will only be made worse by lockdown and by isolation. They show that we're in crisis. We're searching for value and worth, but we don't know where to find it. As human beings, there are many different places from which we might look to find our self-worth and our identity, both from within us and from outside us, from our friends, our families, our jobs, our hobbies. Maybe you look to find it in your sporting ability, what team you're in, or how many goals you score, whether you win. Equally, you might place your value in how many or which friends you have, being seen in the right social circles and being invited to the right parties. Alternatively, it might be your degree, your appearance, or your relationships that give you your self-worth. For those of you who are fans of Lewis Capaldi, you'll know the lines from his song, Someone You Loved. That's going to be hard for me to say these words without singing them. But he sings, I'm going under, and this time I fear there's no one to turn to. This all or nothing way of loving got me sleeping without you. Now I need somebody to know, somebody to heal, somebody to have, just to know how it feels. It's easy to say, but it's never the same. I guess I kind of like the way you helped me escape. So for Lewis Capaldi, it might be a relationship, having someone to love in that way that gives you self-worth and identity. I think we all have that thing in our lives like that. It defines our value, our worth. It's of the utmost importance to us. Getting that like on Instagram gives that joy of being seen and being valued. But these highs are fleeting. What happens when they fade? When the next like doesn't come or that person doesn't text back? This was the reality for former footballer Clark Carlisle. Talking about his battles with depression, he said, everyone else thought I'd made it, that I had the dream life. And I did, but I just suffered a severe knee injury and convinced myself that without football, people would see me for what I really was, which was nothing. Clark was living his childhood dream to be a professional footballer, but then that was taken away, and it took away his self-worth. Being good at football was always what defined him. And that's the reality we see with all of the things we build our self-worth on. They're finite and they're uncertain. If you put all your identity into your relationship, then you're constantly living in fear of it ending. And if the unthinkable happens and you break up, then who could affirm your value? Maybe for you that's the same with your degree. You've worked hard to get to university, and now everyone can see your true worth. But you always have that thought in the back of your mind that if you don't get that first, like all of your mates, that your parents are expecting, then what really are you? When this happens and all these things fail us and fall apart, then where can we look to? Well, some might tell us to focus on building self-esteem, to look within ourselves to find our true beauty and a stable self-worth. Like Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh said, to be beautiful means to be yourself. You don't need to be accepted by others. You need to accept yourself. And I think this sentiment really appeals to our current culture. When we become bogged down by the need to impress our peers and appease our parents, we can simply look to ourselves and find all the affirmation and wealth that we need. Just as author Wayne Dyer said, self-worth comes from one thing: thinking that you are worthy. You don't have to perform well or impress in order to have worth. We simply need to believe that we do. But I think if we really think about this view, we realise some issues. Like, what do we do when we can't seem to see this self-worth within us? When however much we try, that failed assignment or cutting insult from a friend has just left us feeling worthless. Well, then surely we just have to look a little bit deeper or a little bit harder, and then we'll see our true beauty. But when we look deeper, all we find is that we're more flawed and broken than we thought. We can't even live up to our own standards of performance or morality, let alone those we're given from friends or family. We find it really difficult to simply believe that we have self-worth. A study performed a few years ago in Canada attempted to test this theory of self-esteem, of simply convincing ourselves of value. They did this by giving participants self-affirming statements to read every day in order to boost their view of themselves. However, the results found that the majority of those who took part actually felt worse after the 6-month experiment. It goes to show we struggle to believe what we tell ourselves, or we know what is truly within. Although we might say that regardless of other people or what I see when I look inside myself, that humans have an inherent self-worth, that just by the qualification of being part of the human race, we have value. And I think this is a reasonable view. Certainly, as Christians, we believe that as God's creation, humans have value and inherent worth. However, atheists such as Richard Dawkins refute this. Far from having inherent meaning or worth, human beings are just a random accident, a jumble of cells and nothing more. In his book River Out of Eden, he states, "The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." The universe doesn't owe us consolation or condolence. It doesn't owe us a nice warm feeling inside. So for Dawkins, in Dawkins' view, why would a person have any self-worth if we're just a product of this pitilessly indifferent universe? Philosopher and scientist Bertrand Russell said similarly, "Scientifically, I see no reason for attributing to a man different in kind from that which belongs to a baboon or to a grain of sand. Scientifically, we're more complex, but significant. You know, nature kills us off like everything else." So all you're left with then is to construct a fake value of ourselves. And this is why it ultimately fails to give us worth. Even Dawkins, when asked how he could bear to be alive if everything is so cold and empty and pointless, he replied, "Well, at an academic level, I think it is, but that doesn't mean you can live your life like that." So despite his insistence on a meaningless, random universe, in order to live life, you must forget it to be true. I don't know about you, but But for me, I can't believe that the sum of human value is simply this self-constructed lie built on the uncertain things around us and the brokenness within. So we're in search to find identity of something outside of ourselves, outside of our broken selves, which is certain, which won't change or let us down. But where can we find this if not from family and friends, and if not from inside ourselves? Well, I want to suggest that this can be found in Jesus and the eternal self-worth and identity which he holds out to us. In the Bible, which Christians believe is God's word, in one of the Gospels called John, it says this: "Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God." The Bible states that as humans, we're made by God. We're made to be children of God, and that he's calling us to turn to him and take up that identity. But what does it mean to have our identity as children of God? How can we know that it's a certain or better identity than the identities we've previously looked at? Well, we can know that our identity as children of God is certain because it comes from the very person who created us. It's like with a piece of artwork. When we see it, we may be able to make a decent guess of what it is and maybe have a stab at the meaning behind it. But the best way to find out what the painting is and why it was painted is to ask the artists themselves. It's the same, I believe, with us as humans. Who better to tell us our true identity and meaning than God himself? So when God declares that as humans we have value and meaning, and if we turn to him we can be his children, we can trust him in that. We can also know that this is an identity that will not change, because God showed us the ultimate sign of his commitment when he came down as a human, as Jesus. Despite us as humans turning away from him and rejecting our identity as children of God, despite this, God showed his commitment to us. He came down as Jesus to take the punishment of our rejection of him. He died the most painful and undeserved death so that we could have a true and eternal identity as God's children if we simply just turn to him. Jesus' death on the cross was a promise to us that God loves his people and is committed to them. And that's how we know our identity as children of God can be certain. The certainty of our identity is achieved by Jesus' death and not anything we've done. Therefore, it can't be lost because of our mistakes, because of that time you really hurt your friend, or because of that failed exam, or because of that missed kick. There's no more need to strive to earn and maintain your worth and identity. Jesus has already done that. Having our value rooted in being children of God frees us to fully enjoy these things, having relationships, studying for our degree, and playing sports. And this is because we know that we can fail, that they can not work out, and that we still have a value and identity secure. It's a great liberation. This is why all the things we attempt to find our value in don't satisfy. They don't satisfy that need, but it's also why we struggle to believe that we have no worth, that we are just random accidents of the universe. We were made for and by something more. We were all made and known by a God who wants you to know that. That's why we have a longing for something more, a longing for worth and identity that only Jesus can fulfill. And lastly, the identity we can have as children of God is not just an abstract fact, like a membership to a club, but it's a relationship with God. He doesn't simply just declare this title, tell us who we are, and then leave us to it. No, he wants to be in a relationship with us. to be with us as we live the life that he has given us. As we struggle, he promises to comfort us as we go through the heartbreak of broken relationships, the loneliness and anxiety of lockdown, and the pain of injury and illness. He is there as a father, but not just as a distant father who is trying desperately to understand. No, but one who knows exactly what we're going through. When he came down as a man, he felt the pain of losing loved ones, of his friends rejecting him, and of the agony of crucifixion. He knows what these things feel like, and he cares about them. So if we turn to God and take up our identity as children of God, then we can have an identity which is secure and a relationship with our Father who created us. He knows us, and he longs to walk life with us. I wonder what you make of this then, the claim that our true identity can only be found in God. Maybe you find it ridiculous to claim that God can satisfy more than your relationships or sporting success. Or you disagree with the suggestion that where we look to find our identity actually isn't fulfilling us. Can I encourage you to continue to think about these things, to consider what you've heard? Maybe you might find it useful to look at a talk from last week that looked at the topic of identity from a slightly different angle. Why not reach out to a Christian you know or the CU to continue that conversation? Maybe though you find Jesus' claims about our identity as humans convincing and you want to investigate more. Well, please do that, and you can find other videos on the CU Facebook page looking at different topics of faith and life and how Jesus speaks into them. Wherever you're at though, the CU would love to continue the conversation about Christianity with you. So please do reach out and get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks.